I think you probably view yourself as like a CEO running a company.
Oh, absolutely. Most people do.
Right. Like making top-down decisions. You decide to eat a salad or go for a run or get a good night's sleep. And you expect your body to just obediently follow those orders.
Yeah, like you're the one in the driver's seat.
Exactly. But if you actually look through a microscope into your own digestive tract, you quickly realize you aren't the CEO at all.
Not even close.
You are essentially this sprawling, chaotic metropolis. And the locals, the trillions of bacteria down there, they are the ones actually steering the ship.
It's a very comforting illusion, though. I mean, the idea that we are the sole authors of our physical destiny.
Right. But it's just an illusion.
Yeah, the reality is far more collaborative. And honestly, it's a lot more volatile. We are vastly, vastly outnumbered by the microbial life living inside us.
Which brings us to today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking an expedition straight into your microscopic universe today.
And we have a lot to cover.
We really do. We've got this towering stack of source material spanning the latest epidemiological studies, pharmacological research, clinical nutrition reviews.
Really fascinating data in there.
Yeah. And our mission for you listening is actually very simple. We are going to cut through all the wellness influencer marketing fluff you see on your feeds and just extract the hardcore, surprising science.
Because the science of how your microbiome dictates everything is, well, it's wild.
Literally everything. We're talking about your weight, your immune system, all the way up to your mental health.
Yeah. But before diving into the more surprising mechanisms of how this all works,
Yeah.
I think we need to set a baseline.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because reading through the sources, it seems like so much of our overall health comes down to an extraordinary, really delicate balance.
Right. When we talk about this metropolis inside you, 90% of your gut microbiota is dominated by just two major phylae of bacteria.
And those are the Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes, right?
Yep. Exactly. Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes. And the clinical literature really points to the ratio between those two as a primary dictator of your metabolic fate.
Just that ratio, the FB ratio.
Yeah, the FB ratio.
Right.
So for example, Firmicutes are incredibly efficient at extracting calories from complex carbohydrates.
Okay, meaning what exactly?
Meaning if you have a highly elevated Firmicutes ratio, so your microbiome is, heavy on Firmicutes and low on Bacteroidetes, your body will literally harvest more calories from the exact same plate of food than someone with a balanced ratio.
Wow. Wait, really? The exact same plate of food?
The exact same plate.
Yeah.
And this elevated state is strongly linked in the literature to the development of obesity.
Because you're just extracting way more calories than you realize.
Exactly. But then on the flip side, a highly elevated Bacteroidetes ratio is linked to inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD.
So it's not like one is the good guy and one is the bad guy.
No, not at all. Maintaining your health isn't about eradicating one side or the other. I mean, it's really about keeping them balanced on this microscopic seesaw.
Which makes total sense on paper until you look at how easily we accidentally kick that seesaw over on a daily basis.
We kick it over constantly.
Yeah, and before we can even begin to optimize the gut, we really have to look at the mechanisms behind how we actively destroy it.
Right.
And the sources bring up a term that sounds, frankly, quite alarming: metabolic endotoxemia.
It does sound alarming, and it should. Metabolic endotoxemia is basically a scenario where the levels of a specific toxin in your blood become chronically elevated.
And that drives inflammation, right?
Yeah, systemic whole body inflammation. And this cascade, it almost always begins with high-fat diets.
Right.
Consuming a large amount of fat fundamentally alters your gut flora, and it increases your intestinal permeability.
Which is what people casually call a leaky gut.
Exactly. A leaky gut.
So the physical barrier of your intestines, which is, supposed to keep the contents of your digestion completely separate from your bloodstream, literally loses its structural integrity.
Yeah, the structural breakdown happens at the tight junctions between your intestinal cells. And when those junctions fail, molecules called lipopolysaccharides, or LPS, escape.
LPS, I saw that all over the sources. What are they exactly?
So LPS are these toxic structural components. They actually form the outer membrane of gram-negative bacteria in your gut.
Okay.
And as long as they stay inside the digestive tract, they're relatively harmless.
Yeah.
But once that barrier is compromised and they leak into your bloodstream, your immune system flags them as a severe threat.
Because they shouldn't be there.
Right. And this triggers a chronic, low-grade inflammation that is directly linked in the research to type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Reading the mechanics of this was just fascinating to me. I kept picturing these LPS molecules as like uninvited VIPs at a club.
Ah, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. Because once they slip past the gut's physical velvet rope, they don't just float around aimlessly in the blood.
No, they have a transit system.
Yeah, because they are lipophilic, meaning they love fat, they actually hitch a ride on your body's lipid transport system. They bind themselves directly to chylomicrons and to your cholesterol.
Your HDL and LDL.
Exactly, utilizing them like a highway network to travel throughout the entire bloodstream.
They actively hijack your body's own fat distribution infrastructure. And they do that to spread systemic inflammation to your major organs.
It's terrifying.
It is. It's an incredibly efficient, albeit totally destructive, delivery mechanism.
Let me push back on the initial trigger for this, though, because
Yeah.
you mentioned high-fat diets. Is all fat guilty of breaking down that intestinal velvet rope?
Whoa.
Like, does eating a healthy avocado or a handful of almonds suddenly unleash these bacterial toxins into my blood?
No. The source material makes a really crucial distinction there. It is absolutely not all fats.
Okay, good.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the type of fat you consume completely changes the microbial landscape.
So what's the culprit?
Well, animal studies highlight a very specific mechanical chain reaction with milk fat.
Wait, milk fat? Like dairy?
Yeah, milk fat. High consumption of milk fat significantly increases a compound called taurocolic acid in your bile.
And since bile is released to help emulsify and digest those fats, more milk fat just means a higher concentration of this specific acid.
Exactly, the biological response. Now,
Okay.
this taurocolic acid, it acts as an absolute feast for one specific sulfur-reducing bacteria called Balaphila wadsworthia.
Balaphila wadsworthia.
Right. And when you constantly feed it taurocolic acid, this pathobiont, which is basically a bacteria that is normally harmless but turns pathogenic under certain conditions, it blooms completely out of control.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's the overgrowth of this specific bacteria that drives the inflammation and the breakdown of those tight intestinal junctions.
So the avocado doesn't do this.
The avocado does not trigger this pathway. It's how specific saturated animal fats alter the chemical composition of your digestion, which then selectively breeds inflammatory bacteria.
So my morning latte with whole milk might actually be selectively breeding the exact bacterial populations that tear down my gut wall.
It's very possible, yes.
That completely flips the traditional calories in, calories out mindset on its head. I mean, for you listening, the specific fats you consume are actively, mechanically remodeling the structural integrity of your intestinal walls in real time.
By changing what the locals get to eat.
Right. You are continuously feeding the ecosystem that is responsible for maintaining the security of your own bloodstream.
It's a huge responsibility.
So we just saw how escaping LPS toxins triggers systemic inflammation when the gut wall breaks down. Naturally, the billion-dollar wellness industry tells us the ultimate fix for this is just, popping probiotics.
Right, the magic pill.
But the source material makes it very clear that the solution is vastly more complicated.
We need to do some myth busting here, I think, because the supplement marketing is heavily distorting the science.
Oh, absolutely. The commercialization of probiotics has sprinted miles ahead of the actual clinical science in the public eye. So let's start with myth number 1. Fermented foods are a complete solution. I hear this all the time. People assume eating a side of kimchi or drinking a daily kefir completely fixes a leaky gut.
It's a very common misconception.
But the sources point out that while these foods are nutritious, they lack any clinical regulation for specific, viable strains in therapeutic doses.
Exactly. I mean, they are food, right? They're not a targeted medical intervention.
Right. Then there's myth number 2. All probiotics are the same. Like, you just grab any generic bottle off the pharmacy shelf and assume it does the job.
Which is completely false. Bacterial strains are highly specialized tools.
Yeah, the research shows Lactobacillus rhamnosus is documented to help with vaginal infections, while Bifidobacterium longum operates completely differently to relieve irritable bowel syndrome symptoms.
And those strains, they do not cross over in their utility. You wouldn't swallow an IBS-targeted strain and expect it to treat a localized respiratory infection.
Because the mechanism of action is entirely different.
Entirely different.
Which leads to myth number 3, the megadose fallacy.
Yes.
The idea that a higher CFU colony-forming unit count is always better. Marketing pushes these massive 100 billion CFU bottles of a single isolated strain.
Right. The bigger the number, the better it must be.
But the research actually shows that multi-strain synergy, where different bacteria support each other's growth, often vastly outperforms a massive dose of a single strain.
Synergy is key in a microbiome. It's an ecosystem.
So, let me ask the painful question. If my gut barrier is compromised, is my daily, wildly expensive kombucha habit essentially medically useless?
Well, look, fermented foods offer valuable organic acids, right? And they
Yeah.
introduce a temporary diversity of microbes into your system, so they certainly have nutritional merit.
Okay, good. I was worried.
But if you're dealing with a structurally compromised gut barrier and metabolic endotoxemia, kombucha is just a drop in the ocean.
Ah, got it.
The real excitement in the scientific community right now isn't focused on generic yogurt cultures. The focus has shifted entirely to what we call next-generation probiotics, or NGP.
Special forces of the gut.
Exactly.
And the sources highlight two absolute superstars in this NGP category. Let's look at the first one. Akkermansia muciniphila.
Akkermansia, yes.
In a healthy person, this makes up about 1 to 4% of the gut. But what I found fascinating and honestly a bit alarming is its primary mechanism. It paradoxically eats the intestinal mucin layer for its own energy.
The protective mucus lining of your gut wall, yes.
It eats it.
It does. And the paradox is what makes it so effective. I mean, it sounds totally counterintuitive to introduce a bacteria that consumes the very barrier we are trying to protect from those LPS toxins.
Right, it sounds like a terrible idea.
But by grazing on the mucin, Akkermansia actively signals the host body's epithelial cells to ramp up production and secrete more mucin.
So it's like pruning a tree so it grows back thicker and healthier.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It acts like a localized workout for your gut lining.
Wow.
Yeah, the mild, constant stress of the bacteria consuming the mucus forces the human body to constantly regenerate and thicken the barrier, making it vastly stronger and more resilient against leaks.
That's incredible. And the clinical outcomes attached to this process are staggering in the sources. An abundance of Akkermansia is linked to healthy aging and massive metabolic improvements in obesity and insulin resistance.
And it goes even further than that.
Yeah.
Furthermore, it actively enhances the efficacy of colorectal cancer therapies and immunotherapies.
Wait, cancer therapies?
Yes.
Because that structural reinforcement is so incredible. I mean, if a thicker mucin layer keeps the LPS toxins physically further away from the epithelial cells, the immune system isn't chronically exhausted fighting gut leaks.
Exactly. It frees up resources.
So it can actually focus its resources on fighting the tumor alongside the cancer drugs.
A stabilized gut environment fundamentally changes how the immune system allocates its resources.
Okay, so if Akkermansia is the structural architect regenerating the physical barrier, what about the immune system itself? Because the sources highlighted a second superstar NGP for that.
Right. Bacteroides fragilis.
Yes, Bacteroides fragilis.
This specific strain produces a unique symbiotic factor known as polysaccharide A, or PSA.
And what does PSA do?
Well, this single molecule acts as a master diplomat for the human immune system. It promotes a highly specialized class of immune cells, specifically CD39 plus FOXP3 plus regulatory T cells.
Or simply TREGs.
Yes.
TREGs, the peacekeepers of the immune system.
Exactly, the peacekeepers. By promoting these specific peacekeeper cells, the PSA from Bacteroides fragilis effectively signals the body to stand down.
Like calling off the attack dogs.
Right. It calms systemic inflammation and halts overactive immune responses.
Yeah.
Because of this direct mechanism, it is showing immense potential right now as a targeted therapy for autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis.
Where the immune system is mistakenly attacking the body's own central nervous system.
Exactly. It tells the immune system to just chill out.
So the takeaway for you listening is clear. When you are shopping for health products or looking to fix a gut issue, you can't just rely on the generic word probiotics slapped on a label.
It's just not enough.
You need to look for specific, clinically tested strains, like these NGPs, that have a targeted, proven mechanism of action for the exact biological issue you are trying to address.
It's the difference between taking a generic multivitamin and using a highly specific pharmacological intervention.
Completely different ballgame.
Yep.
So we just saw how these specific bacteria manage our physical immune system and gut structure. But the most shocking part of this microscopic ecosystem, at least to me, isn't what it does to your organs.
Here we go.
It's what it has the power to steal from your brain. We have to examine the gut-brain axis.
This is perhaps the most rapidly evolving and honestly disruptive area of microbiome research today.
Let's start with the famous statistic that gets thrown around every wellness blog online. 90% of the body's serotonin is made in the gut.
You see that everywhere.
Everywhere. And when I read that, my immediate thought was, well, if my gut is basically a massive serotonin factory, and serotonin is the chemical responsible for mood and happiness,
Why can't a healthy gut just directly pump those happy chemicals into my brain and cure depression?
exactly. Why doesn't it just fix it?
Because that peripheral serotonin physically cannot cross the blood-brain barrier.
Oh.
Yeah. The serotonin manufactured in your digestive tract is completely walled off from your central nervous system. It cannot get into your brain to alter your mood directly.
So what is that massive 90% supply actually doing down there? Just hanging out?
No, it's very busy. It manages gut motility, it regulates nutrient absorption, and coordinates localized immune responses within the intestines.
Okay, so it's a gut worker.
Right. It is a critical functional molecule for digestion, but it is not the chemical making you feel happy.
Wow.
To understand how the gut actually influences depression, we have to stop looking at peripheral serotonin entirely and examine a completely different mechanism.
The kynurenine pathway.
Yes, the kynurenine pathway.
This is where the biological hijacking happens, which is just crazy. Because tryptophan is an amino acid we get from our diet, right?
From things like turkey, oats, bananas.
Right. And it serves as the raw building block your body uses to manufacture serotonin. Tryptophan sits at a metabolic fork in the road, right?
Tryptophan faces a choice. It can travel down the standard path to become serotonin, or it can be diverted down the kynurenine pathway.
And what determines that?
When you suffer from gut dysbiosis, when your microbial metropolis is out of balance and driving that leaky gut LPS inflammation we detailed earlier, that systemic inflammation acts as a biochemical roadblock. It actively forces your available tryptophan down the kynurenine pathway instead.
Meaning that raw material is no longer available to become serotonin in the brain?
It's gone. It forces the production of neurotoxic compounds instead, such as quinolinic acid.
Neurotoxins.
Yes. And unlike serotonin, these neurotoxins are small enough to cross the blood-brain barrier.
Oh, great.
Once inside the brain, they overstimulate neurons and induce neuroinflammation.
That is wild.
So the inflammation starting in your gut literally steals the raw materials needed for brain serotonin while simultaneously flooding the brain with toxins that actively drive depressive symptoms and brain fog.
That completely shifts how we should view and approach mental health treatments. I mean, you aren't just dealing with a chemical imbalance that spontaneously started in the brain.
Not at all.
You are dealing with a supply chain crisis originating in the gut. And the sources go even further into this when looking at SSRI's selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are the standard frontline antidepressants.
Right. The data strongly suggests that SSRIs don't operate in a vacuum. Their efficacy is highly correlated with the presence of specific gut microbes.
Like Blaudia, Coprococcus, and Bifidobacterium.
Exactly.
Because if that underlying dysbiosis is actively starving the brain of serotonin raw materials, an SSRI is essentially fighting a losing battle.
Right, because SSRIs work by keeping existing serotonin in the brain's synapses for a longer period.
But if the factory is shut down because all the tryptophan is being turned into neurotoxins, there isn't enough serotonin for the drug to act upon in the first place.
Exactly. Gut dysbiosis is now being rigorously evaluated as a prognostic indicator for major depressive disorder.
That is just incredible.
The composition of a patient's microbiome might determine whether a psychiatric drug will be successful or fail completely.
For you listening, the reality is that your current mental health treatment might literally be succeeding or failing based on the specific microscopic organisms living in your digestive tract right now.
It requires treating the body as a whole, interconnected ecosystem, rather than isolating psychiatry from gastroenterology.
Absolutely. So given how incredibly fragile, balanced, and vital this ecosystem is, from dictating our immune response to literally supplying our brain chemistry, what happens when we drop the medical equivalent of a nuclear bomb on it?
Uh-oh. You're referring to the administration of antibiotics.
Yes, I am. The sources include a staggering finding from an Uppsala University study that tracked nearly 15,000 adults in Sweden.
A huge study.
Massive. And they discovered that a single course of certain antibiotics can leave a permanent footprint on the gut microbiome for 4 to 8 years.
A single course of broad-spectrum antibiotics causing an 8-year disruption is a profound shock to the microbial community.
8 years.
Yes, it wipes out keystone species, allowing opportunistic weeds to take over the metabolic real estate.
I couldn't help but compare broad-spectrum antibiotics to a massive forest fire. You have a specific bacterial weed you want to get rid of, maybe a sinus infection, so you just napalm the entire forest.
It's collateral damage.
Right. If a drug like flucloxacillin is going to scorch my internal ecosystem and potentially starve my brain of serotonin for almost a decade, shouldn't I just avoid them entirely?
Oh, hold on. The Uppsala study underscores the critical need for strict antibiotic stewardship. Absolutely. But we must be unequivocally clear. Antibiotics are life-saving medical miracles.
Fair point.
Before their discovery, a minor scratch could easily turn into a fatal systemic infection. The goal isn't to abandon them.
So what's the alternative?
The study specifically highlighted that while broad-spectrum drugs cause massive long-term devastation, narrow-spectrum options like penicillin V left a much smaller, short-lasting footprint.
So it's about utilizing a targeted sniper rifle instead of indiscriminate napalm whenever medically possible.
Exactly. It's about precision.
Okay, what about the strategy of taking probiotics concurrently with the antibiotics, like attempting to reseed the forest while it's actively burning?
Well, most bacterial probiotics simply become collateral damage, right? They are killed by the very antibiotic you're taking.
Because they're bacteria, too.
Exactly. But the sources point out a really clever biological workaround.
Oh.
Saccharomyces boulardii.
Saccharomyces boulardii.
It is a specific beneficial strain of yeast, not a bacteria.
Ah.
Because it's a fungus, it is entirely immune to antibacterial drugs. Clinical trials demonstrate it can survive the antibiotic bomb and reduce antibiotic-associated diarrhea by 37% when taken alongside the medication.
That is a highly actionable protocol right there, utilizing a beneficial yeast to maintain order when taking antibacterial drugs.
It is. But the data also cautions healthy individuals.
In what way?
For people without any active symptoms or antibiotic prescriptions, taking blanket, massive daily doses of bacterial probiotics as a quote-unquote preventative measure just doesn't have the clinical efficacy data to support it.
So don't just take them to take them.
Right. If you are healthy, the science heavily favors feeding your existing good bacteria with a diverse, fiber-rich diet rather than swallowing billions of random lab-grown strains hoping they stick.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting as we pull all of these complex threads together. We started by understanding that delicate Bacteroidetes to Firmicutes ratio and how it dictates calorie absorption.
Right.
We saw how specific animal fats can breed bacteria that tear down our intestinal velvet rope, leaking those toxic LPS molecules into our blood.
And then we dismantled the generalized probiotic myths and explored the incredible targeted therapeutic potential of next-gen strains like Akkermansia regenerating our mucin layer.
We completely rewired how we view mental health, realizing that gut inflammation physically steals the raw materials needed for serotonin, and that common antidepressants require bacterial partners to function.
And finally, we saw the 8-year echo of a single broad-spectrum antibiotic course.
It's intense.
It represents a total paradigm shift in how we fundamentally view human biology and systemic health.
But there is one final, incredibly profound mechanism hidden deep in the source material that we have to address. And it loops all the way back to segment 1.
About the LPS.
Yes. We talked about those LPS toxins leaking through the gut wall and hitching a ride on our lipid transport system. What actually happens to those toxins once they are circulating in the blood? Do they just circulate until they damage an organ?
No, the body fights back. The liver's Kupffer cells catch about 90% of that free-floating LPS within a single hour of it entering the bloodstream.
Within an hour?
Yes. The liver acts as the ultimate filtration checkpoint. But the truly remarkable part is how the liver responds to this toxic invasion.
Right.
It actively ramps up the massive production of apolipoprotein AVE.
And apolipoprotein AAV is a primary structural component of HDL.
Yes, HDL is what your doctor traditionally calls the good cholesterol.
Right. So this means that what we have historically viewed as just a passive, heart-healthy lipid is actually being rapidly manufactured and weaponized by your liver as a direct, real-time immune defense.
Exactly. The liver deploys this HDL as a biological hazmat team
A hazmat team.
to bind to neutralize and clear the bacterial toxins that are leaking from your own compromised gut.
That completely shatters the illusion we talked about at the beginning of this deep dive. I mean, you're not a CEO sitting in an isolated corner office issuing top-down commands to a passive machine.
Not at all.
You are a sprawling, incredibly dynamic metropolis. Your cardiovascular system is actively acting as an immune defense for your digestive system. Every single bite of food you take, every type of fat you consume, and every pill you swallow is a complex negotiation.
A negotiation with the trillions of microscopic locals who are actually steering the ship.
Yep.
They govern our physical and mental health, and they drive a very hard bargain.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the microbiome. Keep questioning the marketing, keep learning the science, and remember to treat your microscopic hitchhikers with a lot of respect, because they are the ones truly running the show. See you next time.